Good afternoon and welcome to today's session of ownership of a vehicle and licensing. So we'll wait a few moments for people to sign in. So make sure that you log in under the comments and also to send me a text message indicating that you are here. Good afternoon. Wow, we're up to 10. At least 10 views. May not be everybody from the class, but here we go. Now the phone's going crazy. Just wanted to say how impressed I am of everybody's homework so far that I've received for the seatbelt project. The posters were fantastic. Someone sent a radio ad that is by far the best radio ad I have received for this type of a project. I think what I'm going to do is curate some of the posters that everybody sent in, and I will show you at the end of the week what people did for work, because it really was really involved. You took the time to do the graphics, to get the information, to try to persuade people into changing their behavior, their attitudes towards seatbelts, helmets, and airbags. And if you have a video, remember you can send it to me as a link, or we'll try some other way that I can get to it and everybody can see it. So it looks like we almost have a full class, because I know sometimes people are not able to make it. Oh, and I had an app on my iPad that I probably purchased about a year ago, and I was always going to start to draw and doodle and do things like that. And I know that I gave you the project to create a poster. So on Saturday morning, I got out my iPad and had nothing else to do while I was watching the morning news with my cup of coffee. So I actually made a poster. So I know I had you do one. Here's my poster. That's my poster that I drew Saturday morning. Got my facts at the top. I could make them a little bit bigger, but kind of like to doodle. This was inspired by my trip to Italy this past fall, and they have very small Mini Coopers and things like that, and I figured it would be kind of cool to do something like that. So that's what I did, to kind of stay in the spirit of what you guys had to do. Okay, let me get out of... There we go. Let's get out of that. Okay, get out some paper and pen or pencil to do notes for today. This was based upon the section in the manual on licensing, which would be, I believe, 2. Section 2 is heavy on licensing, registration, titling. So that is going to be our focus for today. So hopefully I'm going to bring to light some things that you never thought about. And if you did know about licensing and registration and titling, I hope to give you just a little bit more of an insight of how New Hampshire goes about doing these things. So let's kind of get into today's lesson. So getting out on the road, we think of learning to drive or getting a license, but owning a vehicle, what is a title? How do I register a vehicle? Why do I have to get my car inspected? Are all things that I hope after today that you will have answers to. So let's kind of get right into it. And I want you to write down in your notes, is driving is not a right, it is considered a privilege. So just because you are paying for a driver's ed program Just because you've completed a driver's ed program doesn't mean that everybody's going to go and get their license, especially on their first try. So the state will only give people a license if it shows that they are responsible behind the wheel of the car, if they have a basic knowledge base of the rules and regulations that exist. So we kind of know how the state regulates people out on the road. But I also included in your notes here that I want you to write down is because you are under the age of 18, your parents are going to have a big part in you having a license. So, in order for you to get your license, your parents have to sign off on a form when you go to the substation. But this is the part that most people don't realize. At any time after you get your license, if your parents wanted to contact the DMV and say, you know, my son, my daughter, they're hanging around with the wrong crowd, they're getting into things that I don't feel comfortable that they should be getting involved with. I do not want to be responsible for them any longer, that your parents can actually ask the state to go into the computer system and put a hold on your driver's license. So it would almost be like you didn't even have a license. So your parents are taking away it's really liability. They don't want to be liable for you. So basically they're taking away their signature that they signed for when you got your license. Now, after a hearing, it can be reinstated, and it's not that much of a problem. But I think most people don't realize that your parents can actually contact the state and make things kind of tricky if you're not keeping up your grades and, like I said, hanging out with the wrong crowd. So the manual is just an overview of the laws and rules and regulations that exist. Now, we really don't go into deep detail about every single law that's out there for driving. So there may be questions that you may text me once we start driving that you may ask me that I may not know the answers to, and we're going to have to dig a little bit deeper. But the content that you're getting through driver's ed, through your manual, through your textbook, should give you enough information to make reliable judgments and reasoning on what should be happening out on the roadway. So you have to practice safe driving all the time. So it's not something that when you're out on the road, you're thinking there's nobody else around, so speed limits don't matter, stop signs don't matter. It's a mindset and it's an attitude, a type of behavior that's going to guide you regardless if you're driving at 4 or 5 in the morning when there's no one around, or if you're driving at noontime when it's bumper to bumper traffic. You have to stay focused and keeping your driving habits consistent with safe driving. Now, there are two terms here: license suspension and revocation. And I want you to understand which each one means. Now, we're going to be hearing more about these terms as we go along in the section on speed, and then when we talk about insurances and what the state's going to require from you. But the first term, suspension, is basically a short period of time that you're going to lose your license, but it's going to be given back without much of a fine or a length of time of not driving. So let me give you the time frame for a person under the age of 20. You do need to know this, hint for the midterm, for the final, and it was in your reading. So a person under the age of 20 on their first moving violation, so moving violation would be speed, running stop sign, failing to yield, is a 20-day suspension. So you mail in your license, your piece of plastic license, to the state. Once they receive it, the 20 days count off, then they send it back to you. So technically, it's going to probably be a little bit longer than the 20 days. You do have to pay a reinstatement fee, but then you get it right back. So your first offense would be 20 days. Your second offense would be 45. And on your third offense, it's 90. Now, I don't know why they started off with 20 and then started to double from 45 to 90, but that is the sequence. And once you get beyond that, it's going to be a longer period of time. But for most people, especially under the age of 20, I don't know many people are getting that many tickets right off. Now, revocation, on the other hand, is a longer period of time of not being able to drive, a bigger fine, and you may have to be retested, driving, written, depending on how long your license taken away. And some, I guess the easiest way for me to explain a revocation would be someone that was probably picked up for drinking and driving multiple times. So you start off with a suspension with drinking and driving, and then you get into your second, third, fourth, it does go to revocation. Or people that are under suspension and they still continue to drive, they know suspension's not working, so revocation's going to kick in. So revocation is by far the worst of the two. Usually revocations start out around a year, and then it goes up to 3, 5, maybe even a lifetime of not being able to drive. Now, when you hear lifetime, there does come a point when you may be able to request from the state for you to be, given a hearing, and then certain things have to take place, like being on an insurance policy before you get your license. But for the most part, that's giving you a good definition of suspension and revocation. So remember, a good driving personality is related to your attitude. So once we get out driving our 10 hours, I'll be able to see how you interact with traffic, whether you understand yielding. Do you use your signal? Are you making eye contact? Do you understand people that are waving at you to do certain things? Do you use a hand signal to communicate to people that may not be looking like pedestrians? So I'll be able to have a better gauge of what type of driver you're going to be as I start driving you. Now, there are 19 locations throughout the state for licensing. So what I want you to write down in your notes, that most people in the Durham area will be going to Durham or Epping for your driver's test, but you are not required to stay at those two locations. If you feel more comfortable driving to Concord, if you want to go to Manchester, to Keene, any of the locations that the state has, you're able to go to. So don't feel like you're locked in. When you do go for your license, you have to show 2 forms of ID with the proper fee, and the proper fee is $50. That's going to come up on another slide. The 2 forms of ID would be your birth certificate, passport, a visa, school ID, but one has to be official, like your passport or your original birth certificate. So that is a must. Your second one could be, your school ID, pay stub if you work someplace, something like that. And then I also put down for non-residents. So in the manual, they always talk about people that are coming to New Hampshire, acquainting themselves to the laws. So when someone moves to another state, you usually have to switch over your license within a certain amount of time. In New Hampshire, that's around 60 days. So whenever you enroll in a school, take a job, things like that, then you're looking at maybe changing your residency. But the other thing too is that if you come to like UNH, if you're a tourist, these people do not have to switch over their license because it's a temporary time frame that they're here, and they're not required to switch over. Same thing if you were to work, let's say for the summer, you wanted to go live with your grandparents, they lived in Pennsylvania, you don't have to get a Pennsylvania license even though you're going to be there for 3 months. So that's longer than 60 days, but you are just there for summer employment. You just drive around Pennsylvania with your New Hampshire driver's license. You're getting a youth operator's license, so I do want you to know this. It's good for 5 years from the date that you get it. You must not drive with more than one non-relative for your first 6 months. So if you do get stopped by the police, they may request proof of who's in the car, and then you may have to show proof of whether they're related to you or not. If you have more than one non-relative in the car, you've got to remember, even if they're older than 18, you should have everybody belted. And your restriction for driving is between 1 in the morning and 4 in the morning. So you should be able to get to swim practice, to hockey. Prom is going to probably be okay. So those hours are pretty safe, meaning that there's really no reason why you need to be out at those hours. So be very careful about that. because I think the state is taking a look at that because they think, especially in the summertime, people like staying out till 2 or 3 in the morning, and that's when you're going to run into trouble. So, how to apply for a driver's license? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to receive an application. I believe I gave you a link in your folder, so make sure you go back to your folder, take a look at that. You can download that. You can actually fill it out right now. Even though we're not done driver's ed, we haven't done our driving, but there's no reason why. Just don't date it, but you could have it already filled out because it's your, birth given name and address and stuff like that. So, that is something you could put right in your folder. We already mentioned $50. There are multiple ways you can pay for that. You can pay cash, you can buy check or credit card. Your parental form, when we were talking about your parents can take away your license, this is what they're signing. They're signing a DSMV 38 form. And that is something else that I included in that sheet for you to download. Driver's ed certificate I'll be giving to you once we complete everything that we have to. So the only thing that I have to do with you is this classroom that you're doing now. And when we finally get to our driving, remember, your parents can do your observation right now. I don't have a form that they need to sign yet. I still have to make one out, but I'll have that ready for you. When we first start out our driving, your parents can just sign that off, and then that will be taken care of. And that's going to basically help out, too, when we do start our driving, that we'll be able to just schedule out our hours, and you'll be dropped off at the school, drive your hour with me, and then get picked up again. And kind of moves things along pretty fast. The parent-student 40-hour log, you should be working on that right now. Hopefully you've got a lot of free time. And I'm not too sure. I don't think anybody's told me when you're done your online classes at the high school. So if someone sometime today, if you do know what that is, if you could text that to me, because I'm hoping that we can start up hopefully in a week or two. That's my hope. I'm hoping this week we're seeing the curve being dropped down, and I hope the state relaxes the requirements of people that can go out to work. And once school is over for you, where you don't have to be online with your English teacher, math teachers, we should be able to drive. So I'm hoping that May will be a heavy drive month for the class that I had prior to yours and for you, so I can get you guys done before the beginning of summer. So if someone knows when your online classes are over, please just text me that, because I have not heard from Oyster River at all. I'm kind of the ugly stepchild of classes at Oyster River. I only find out last minute what's going on. So please let me know. The other thing, too, I was thinking about today is that we've gone through 1 week of classes, is that at any point, most of the questions that you've been asking me have been in relationship to homework. But if we're covering something and you quite don't understand it or you have a question about it, you could put a comment here on YouTube. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, just send me a text and I'll try to answer any questions that you have. It's really hard for me to do this type of teaching because I don't get the feedback. I don't get to see what you may be struggling with information. So, June 5th, someone just told me. Thank you very much. Okay, so we still have the whole month of May, I guess. Well, maybe if they reduce the restrictions, we can start driving in the afternoon. So hopefully we'll get at it. But please feel free to drop me a message on any type of question that you have, because that's why I'm here. I'm here to answer and to give you much information that I have. And like I said, if I don't know it, I want to find it out for you. Now, I found an error in the state manual and what's online through the Department of Motor Vehicles. So I'm going to give you both. So in the manual, it talks about a real ID. Now, a real ID is something that is going to be across the board in all 50 states. And what it says online is on October 1st, 2021, the federal government will require New Hampshire driver's license or non-driver ID cards to meet requirements of wow, what did I do there? I got to go in there and fix that. Um, be used as identification to board a domestic flight or to enter a federal facility. But in the manual, if you downloaded the manual, it says 2020. So this October, it says in the manual, but on the website, it says 2021. So I've got to contact somebody through the DMV and find out what is the correct requirement. Now, a passport may be such a form of ID to gain acceptance to boarding an airplane and to entering a federal building. So for right now, and then probably after, if you do have a passport, then maybe you don't have to get the real ID. But this is what it looks like. Notice the star on the license. That's an indicator. So when someone looks at your license really quick, they'll be able to tell right off that it's a real ID. They're trying to find ways that people can't alter a license, and we're trying to stay somewhat consistent through all 50 states with making things look, the same, so people can read it quicker at airports and other facilities and process you a more timely manner. Let's talk a little bit about practice driving. Now, we all know that you have to be 15 and a half when you start. So most of you started to do this already. Most of you have already told me that you got quite a bit, if not all of it done, which is kind of cool. The licensed driver has to be 25 years of age in the front seat with you. But here's the part that's not in the manual that I want you to write down, and I think some of you probably have a problem with this right now, is you have to stay within the borders of the state of New Hampshire. Legally, you cannot practice drive or legally drive in another state. Every state has their own requirements for young drivers. Maine and Massachusetts has a permit system, which means that you must go to a substation and take a test to indicate that you have basic understanding of laws. And at that point, they give you a paper permit that you keep with you as you drive. And that is your proof that you can legally be on the road practice driving. But in New Hampshire, the only thing that we have is proof of age. The state has no idea if you have any knowledge, anything going on upside your head about what driving's all about. Yielding, right of way, how to merge. They just assume the driver that's with you is going to give you the appropriate promptings and information for you to drive legally and correct. So you are actually driving on someone else's license. So if you were stopped, let's say for speeding or falling or failing to yield, the person that you're practicing driving with is the one who's going to be getting the ticket, not you. Okay, because you don't have a license. But the other thing people ask me a lot is that, can I actually have a driving record without having a license? Yes, you can. So if you were to take out your parents' car, let's say Friday night, they went down the neighborhood to visit some friends. Well, social distancing, I don't think that's probably what's going to happen. But let's say we didn't have social distancing. Your parents were down visiting friends in the neighborhood, and you took the family car out. You could be stopped because you don't have a license. So if you were speeding, you could have a driving record without having a license. Yes, that is true. And it could prevent you from getting your license in a timely manner. So just make sure that the person's paying attention too when you're driving. They can't be reading the paper on their phone. They're supposed to be giving you help. What to bring to your driving test? We've talked about the two forms of ID and what they are: your birth certificate, passport, visa, school ID, stuff like that. A vehicle that is a good operation condition and a licensed driver, preferably a vehicle that you are familiar with. So I would not use a vehicle that you haven't driven probably at least 5 times. The more that you drive a vehicle, the more you're going to be used to the brake, the accelerator, the steering, where the mirrors, the controls are. So if you're going to take your grandfather's Lexus to the test, which is fine, but if you've never driven before, you may mess up, and you don't want that to happen. And you can't explain to the testing examiner, well, I'm not used to this car. This is why I didn't hit the brake pedal at the right time, the right amount, and why I went beyond the stop line. They're just going to grade you on the vehicle that you're in. We'll talk more about that too when we get to licensing. If you choose to go to Dover Point, this is what the testing site looks like. And I wanted you to pay attention to the sign that's off to the right in the picture. Do not enter. And if you are coming from the opposite direction, there's a do not enter sign in that direction. I can't tell you how many times, I think at least once a year, I have a student that tells me that they failed their driving test. And I'm quite surprised when they tell me that. And I said, well, what went wrong? And at least a few people have told me over the years that when they came back to the testing site, so the test is almost over, you're just coming back to the site to park the vehicle, they went back into the parking lot the wrong way. Read your signs. You cannot leave an angle parking lot the way that you came in. So you got to know. You got to know which way to go in and which way to come out. So make sure that you're looking at your signs. But that is the Dover Point testing site. Epping is a little bit busier area. It's right on 125. There are others that I'm somewhat familiar with Tamworth and Concord and Manchester, but I don't know many students that are actually choosing those sites to go to. So this is what I want you to write down so you know the process. So you've passed driver's ed, you've got all your information. You go to the substation. Before you go in the morning, just make sure that all the paperwork is filled out correctly. You do not want to get to the testing site and have to fill out more paperwork because they may push you off to the side and let other people go in front of you. And the lines do start to form early in the morning. So have your fee and your IDs ready. So when you go in, and just like in the picture here, there's going to be a person that you're going to be giving this information to. But the earlier you show up in the morning and having everything done, it's going to make the process a lot quicker and less stressful. So kind of plan out your day. Now, you can write this down. This is only through years of experience with other students. I find the best time to go, is probably between like 10 and 12 at Dover and between 1 and 3. You can go early in the morning. They open up at 8:15, but remember that you're also going to be driving in early morning traffic. So people going to work for 8:30 and 9 o'clock, you're going to be involved in that traffic going over the bridge. Same thing with Epping going on 101. So a little bit later in the morning, I find is to be a little bit less stressful on the driving portion of your test. But you can go any time that you want. I just think 10 to 12 and 1 to 3 are the 4 hours that is best. There will be people there between 12 and 1, but I don't think they take as many people. They could be understaffed or they could be hungry. You got to remember, too, these licensing examiners are human, so unless the coffee is kicked in early in the morning, they could be a little bit grumpy at 8:15. Hopefully by 10 o'clock, they've had a cup or two and they're in their groove and things are going pretty well. But for the most part, they're human. So talk to them. If you don't like to talk to people, don't talk to them. But I gave you a couple things here at the bottom: being rested, dressed, and clean your car. So let's talk about rested. Um, you don't want to be up all night studying. Try to study a couple days before. Don't think you're going to cram. I don't think the written test is that difficult. If you pass my test is 2 or 3 times more difficult than what you're going to do with the state. So if you did well with my class, you should have no problems with the written part. So be rested. That way your mind is sharp. You're able to process and see things quickly, and you're going to be at your best. Dressed, I mean, all I'm saying is that you don't want to make it look like you don't care about getting your license. I'm not talking about, wearing a suit and tie or a dress and you doing your hair and makeup and all that stuff. But, I just find that people, I wouldn't come in flip-flops and a tank top in the summer. It may be hot, but it's just me. I'm just thinking maybe you're too laid back. Now, the clean car probably is more important than being the way that you dress. And what I mean by that is that make sure when someone is getting in the front seat with you, so make sure you don't have, 2 days of trash on the floor from McDonald's. Make sure that, it doesn't smell in your vehicle. Make sure your windows inside and out have been washed and clean, and your mirrors and stuff like that. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable and safe in your vehicle. You don't want to be making them, because everything comes down to first impressions. Okay, let me just put it that way. You can never redo your first impression. So the way that they approach you and look at you and look at your car may have a minor influence on what they perceive you to do as you drive. So put things in perspective and make it show that you cared enough to come alert, dressed, in clean car to get a license. That's your goal. That's what you want to do for the day, and you're showing them you've taken that necessary steps. Now, once you walk inside, you'll be given a number. And what I said here is you'll wait and wait and wait. On the board, you can see in the TV screen, they give you a rough estimate of, once they give you the number, of when you'll probably be able to go up to one of the counters. So the counters have numbers above them. They'll say B12 to counter number 9. And that's where you're going to be going. Okay, so you sit in the chair and you wait for your number to call. And it can be a long wait, especially when you're dealing with a driving test. Doesn't take too long to get in to do the eye test, the written test, but the driving, because they can only take a person out. They may have 2 examiners at a time. So when there's 8 to 10 people, that's backing up drive times for 2-3 hours, because each driving test is going to be roughly 15 to 20 minutes. So let's talk about you're now getting your test. You've given them paperwork, you're legal, you're ready to go. So you've got to prove that you're able to drive. First thing, and I actually, if we were in class, I would have already given you an eye test. I set up a Snell chart and I have you read it. So the first thing that they do to you is they have you read a eye chart. With one eye, 20/30, with both eyes, 20/40. I need you to know that. So know every single part of this slide. If you fail your eye test, you do not take your written test or your road test. They send you home. So make sure, if you have glasses and you haven't had your eyes tested for a while, I would do that in the next month or 2. Because if you fail your eye test, you now have to get a note from your eye doctor indicating that you are able to see and you're able to be retested. And that could take time to get in to see the eye doctor. Now, once you pass the eye test, then they take you to the testing room, and they sit you in front of a computer, and they have you do a written test or oral test. And now what I mean by oral is that they have you put your headphones on and plug it into the computer. And as you take the computer test, if you want the questions and the answers read to you, you would just hit a button and you would hear everything. Okay, sometimes people can process and reason things better when someone's reading them to them. So you have that ability. Now, once you pass the written test, you go on to your road test. It takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes. It's probably not longer than that, much longer, and it's definitely not too much shorter than that because they're on a route. So, and I'll talk more about the driving test on another slide coming up. But first, I want to show you the computer test. Back about 4 or 5 years ago, when they went from a written test to a computer test, I went to the DMV in Concord, and they were doing a training for driver's ed teachers. And I basically knew the person that was running the workshop. He was actually one of my students, and you'll hear me talking to him during this short video. But I asked him if I could videotape what it looks like to take the test. So what you will see, the person in the pink here is a driver's ed teacher at Merrimack High School. He was the person that was willing to sit down and do the test. So I'm going to show you probably about 6 minutes of what it's like, and they're going to explain some of the features of the written test to you. So let me prompt this up here.
You notice there's a volume. There's a volume here on the right. We also have headphones that plug in. Everybody gather around. You can come stand back here as well if you can't see. And what it's going to do is it walks you through each individual screen, kind of prompts you to the next screen. It's pretty self-explanatory. Hit continue, go on to the next one. And what it does is it gives you 4 dates of birth.
Do you know which one it is?
No, I don't actually. You have to pick your date of birth to continue. So when you walk into our test room and you see 5 test stations, well, how do I know which one is mine? Well, number
I'll
one.
be right back. Jay will
Come on, Bill, I can get
What was that?
April 6, 94.
Okay.
694, that'll be the bottom.
Thank you.
It tells you at the beginning that it's a 40-question test and that you need to get 32 to pass.
Is every question based on the manual?
No, it is not. There are a couple of questions in there that are required in your curriculum that are in there that aren't in the manual.
And I know that Trooper O'Leary had stated that he had mentioned this to you folks in there, but we are getting some calls from people saying, you know, this wasn't in the manual when they have just been to driver's ed. And so it's very important that you folks know that it's not just the manual that they're tested on, it's your curriculum. So that is very important that you impart that information to your people.
Extremely few and far between, so it's not like it's an issue. It's just something that actually cropped up recently.
Do a sample test.
Yep, and what you do is at the beginning of the test here, it gives you a choice, a sample test or begin test. And sample test, all that does is show you how the computer system works. So if you go ahead and hit sample test. Shows you a picture of a horse and asks you what it is. Pretty simple. Here's the great part about this test. When you pick an answer, it's going to ask you to confirm that answer.
You didn't tap it.
So there is absolutely no way you can come back and say, hey, listen, I hit C and A came out.
If I didn't like that answer,
You could hit no.
yep, go ahead.
There you go.
This might have to be recalibrated. We haven't used it that
This
much,
one hasn't
but
been used in a couple of
so
months.
but it is the touch screen is usually instant.
Takes a second to catch up. It'll ask you to confirm your answer. Is that correct? And at this point, because it's just a sample, it's not going to tell you if you got it right or wrong. It's just so that you know where to touch the screen and what pressure to use, things like that. Go ahead, begin test.
Okay, take his license away.
Yep, it's good.
What about the volume? Oh, here it is.
It's going to ask you to confirm your answer.
Big red.
That's just behind 33.
Yeah, on the left-hand side, you drive down the road. You gotta be down the road between the old
Probably it hasn't been used as well. Yep, it recognized it. It'll just take a second. But as you go, it'll have your time at the bottom, and there's a lot of great features that were built in with this system. Number one, the quick pass fail, like I said, when you get to the point where you no longer need to continue whether you're passing or failing, it'll let you know. Skipping the question portion, if the power goes out, here's a great question. When this system stops, and we've had it happen a couple times already, it stops the time, stops you at that question. When the power comes back on, you go back to your machine and you start with the date of birth all over again, and then as soon as you select the first question you left on, the time starts up again. And we've been doing this since, we've had this system implemented here since April. I think we've had maybe 3 people time out on tests. It doesn't happen very often.
Can we videotape the whole thing so that you can have 30 of the questions?
Yeah. Could we do that? All what, 2,000 different tests that you have?
You forget the time.
My students need all the help they can get, Jay. Come on. You know what it was like, Jay? Come on.
I'm just afraid Gordon's going to end up by
It
losing his
recognizes
license.
it's just going
Well,
really
how do you
slow.
know it recognizes?
Because you can see the yes change.
Oh, I see.
Yep, it depresses it.
This sign is
This is what they call a computer.
But you see, this
is
test
not an
offers a lot
abacus.
more visual aid than the written paper test did.
no parking.
Hey, what do you do in your own time?
Gives you the option to enlarge the picture so you can see it. If you actually touch any portion of the lettering on the screen, it makes that bigger as well.
For the visually impaired.
Right. So if you can't see to drive, we can make the lettering bigger for you.
We're going to have another workshop another week or so.
17th.
So if you look at the bottom, he's got 2 correct, 0 incorrect. And it tells you the number needed to pass as you go.
I get it going on.
The maximum speed limit in a business area is A.
Got a lifeline, right? Got 3 lifelines.
Okay, you can see that it's not that complicated of a test. The signs you probably already know, and being multiple choice, it's just eliminating the ones you know it's not, and then try to narrow it down to 2 and then choose. One of the questions was actually something that we had earlier last week when it was, what to do before you get into your vehicle, getting ready to drive. And we know, walking around the vehicle, making sure everything looks fine before you get out onto the road. So you can see that it's not, as they said in the test or in the video, the test is not just the manual. It's just not the textbook either. It's the information that you're getting with each session here. So that's why it's so important to stay for the whole session, take good notes, and you shouldn't have any problem at all. The thing that's really cool about this test is that once you hit that 80%, the test ends. So once you hit 32 right, it is over. You do not go on for question 33, 34, 35. It is done. Now, if you also know that it's very easy to get stressed out when you start seeing that, you thought you knew the answer and then you hit you hit the button and you think it's going to show you that you got it right and then you get it wrong. It's going to, make you nervous, and then you're going to maybe second guess yourself for the rest of the test. So I would recommend not paying attention to the bottom. And if you don't know a question, just skip it. It'll bring it back again to the end of the test, and you shouldn't have a problem. I think in a given year, students that I've had, at least the ones that get back to me, I may have, when I have over 100 students every year, maybe 10 or less will have problems with the written part. So 10%, I actually have about 140, 150 kids, so 10 less than 10 is not that bad. It's less than 10%. Let's take a look at the testing sheet for when they take you out to drive. So you've passed the written part. So they'll tell you to go out into your car and get it ready for the driving test. So that picture that I have to the right that says before you go, they want you to put that hanging from your mirror, and it's staring right at you. So here on this slide, you should be able to read it and write down notes. It tells you exactly what they're going to be looking for when they take you out to drive. They're not trying to trick you, but they want to make sure that you have the necessary skills to be a good driver. Think about it. What they're looking for is, can you be an independent driver? Are you able to maintain your position, your speed, make decent turns and stops, interact with traffic correctly? Can you be an independent driver? So at the end of the test, if they feel, that you're ready, they're going to sign off. And really, that's what it indicates. Because once you leave that building with that piece of plastic, legally, you do not need another person in the car to drive with you anymore. You are driving solo. So no parent, no driving instructor, no grandparents who may have helped you get your 40 hours in. Nobody's in the car with you anymore. It's just you. So they've got to make sure that without a reasonable doubt that you're able to do this, and then they'll sign off. Now, I'm not going to really get into the driving score sheet here, but if you want to come back to this later after driver's ed, just know that this video is going to stay on YouTube, so you can always come back to today's lesson and, just take a snapshot of this and download it and print it out, and you can use this as a guide when your parents drive with you. I have something like this when I drive with you. Your last couple times of driving with me is a sample driving test, and I'll say, oh, they would have taken 3 points off here, 5 points here. This would have been automatic failure. So I will give you an idea at the end of driving with me is how I would score you. And that should be things that you need to work on. So when you go for your driving test, you're not going to have any hangups. You're going to be able to go right in there and pass on your first try. So let's talk about the classification system. So there are a few things that we're going to go over quickly here that I want you to know. Do not need to know anything about commercial driving licensing except that you have to be 18 in order to get a commercial driver's license. This is what I want you to write down: operator's driver's license. You're actually getting a subcategory of this, a youth operator's license. That allows you to a Class D license, and you can drive a vehicle up to 26,000 pounds. And that's quite a bit. You can also tow a trailer with a weight of up to 10,000 pounds. If you're interested in getting a motorcycle license, we'll talk more about that the last week of class, and we have different classifications of motorcycles. So we have motor driven cycle, and we have moped license. So just kind of know they're different classes. I'm not going to test you on the horsepower and stuff like that. The license restriction that I want you to be familiar with is B, because most people do have contacts or eyeglasses. So my recommendation to you is, as you go for your eye test, if you have glasses but you want to try to drive without needing your glasses on all the time, tell them when you look into the machine to read the letters, which they're going to ask you to do. Can I try it without my glasses? Or I don't have my contacts in. And they'll let you try. And if you don't do well, they'll say, okay, put your glasses on, put your contacts in. And then they'll retest you. But if they do test you with your glasses, you always have to drive with your glasses. Because if you get pulled over and they see there's a B restriction on your license and you don't have your glasses on, you're going to get an additional ticket, additional fine. Now, mechanical aid are for people that can't operate a vehicle because maybe they're a paraplegic or they've got some leg problem, so they do their braking and acceleration with a lever up near the steering wheel. Prosthetic aid is a D. Automatic transmission is E. Outside mirror is an F. G is limited to daylight only. This could be people that are just getting over being on seizure medication. This could be people that have bad eyesight at night. This could be people that are been released from prison and they're on a work release. So any of these restrictions, you've got to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing while you're out driving. Now, the IID, the ignition interlock device, is we're going to talk more about that when we have the alcohol section. But they do have a device that they can hook onto a vehicle that before you start it, you have to blow into a tube, and it will give a reading of what your alcohol level is inside your body. If it is above what they've set, which is probably a zero tolerance, then the car's not going to start. So that is probably important to know what that is too. But for the most part, a B restriction is what you should be familiar with. Okay, your license runs out in 5 years from your date of birth. Expiration date is shown on your license. And the cost we've already mentioned today is going to be $50. So 2 months before your license expires, you'll be sent a reminder in the mail. Instructions will include what to do if you can't renew in the time frame that they give you. So what I want you to write down in your notes, and I've got it in bold type here, it is your responsibility to renew. It's not the state's. So a lot of times with people your age group, let's go 5 years from now, you're going to be, you're 16, 17 now, you're going to be 21, 22 possibly. So you could have gone to college, you could have stayed in a state to get residency, so you're not even really a New Hampshire resident anymore. So a lot of things are going on in the 5 years after you get your license. So just make sure, change of name, change of address, all that stuff is up to date, and just rely that or hope that the state will get you the information telling you what you've got to do for renewing. Okay, where to keep your license and registration? This is a big one. This is a question I may ask. Anyone driving a motor vehicle in New Hampshire must have with them a valid driver's license and registration in their vehicle. So we keep our registration in the glove compartment. Okay, we should keep our license in our pocket, in our purse, someplace. So when you get pulled over, these are the two things the state or the state police or the local police are going to ask for. So if you take a long time or you don't have it with you, they're going to detain you longer, and they may even give you a ticket for not having it with you at the time. So you don't want to run into problems with a police officer. So let's talk about ownership of a vehicle. And we call ownership of a vehicle a title. Okay, and when you go to title a vehicle, it's usually around a $25 title fee, and you go to the town clerk. Okay, a used vehicle's owner's title will be assigned to you. If you bought it new, like at an auto dealer, like at Toyota, like at Bill Doobie, the new vehicle, you're going to get the manufacturer certificate. So Toyota makes it out as you're being the owner. Now, whether it's the new vehicle or if you bought it used on Craigslist, you have to take those titles and have a new one made out where it's just your name at the top. So the other thing I want you to write down is to remember, if a loan was taken out to purchase a vehicle, the bank owns the vehicle with you too. And the bank is going to require you to have insurance on it. So some of you have been working part-time. Your parents may help you out with this so you don't have to take out a loan. But like we said, 5 years, a lot of things are going to happen to you. There's a good chance that your parents aren't going to buy you a car once you turn 19, 20. You're out of the house on your own now. You're going to have to buy the car and get all this stuff done. So you need to know these things. So you're going to have to take out a loan. But remember, you have to have insurance on it because the bank wants to get paid in case you crash the vehicle. They get their portion of the loan. Once that's settled, then whatever's left in a car crash, you get that money to purchase another vehicle. And when, let's say you don't have a car crash, but you pay off your loan, once the loan is paid off, the bank will send you the title. And now you become the sole owner of that vehicle because you don't owe the bank any more money. This is what a title looks like. I also put up here what the previous owner's signature is and your signature below it. So both have to sign it. It's kind of hard to blow up for you to see everything, and we really don't have to get into much detail. But I do want to mention that when you do buy a used vehicle, and this is a title of a used vehicle, make sure that you do check Carfax. Make sure that you get in writing that it will pass inspection. I would never buy a used vehicle from somebody unless I knew that it was going to pass inspection. And be very careful when you buy a vehicle where they indicate on the listing as is. Because what as is means to me are there are hidden mechanical problems that I know about, but you may not. So a lot of times when you buy a used vehicle, you may want to take it to a mechanic so they can take a look-see at everything to make sure that it is in good operating condition. Because unless you're a mechanic, there are going to probably be some things that you're going to miss. I mean, for the most part, if you're familiar with cars, you can see some of the obvious stuff. And the other thing, too, is that your odometer is going to be a good indicator of how many miles the car has been driven, so whether there's a lot of wear and tear. So the more miles on a car, of course, the value of the vehicle goes down, but it also, you may ask questions like, when was the last time you had the transmission flushed? When was the last time the brakes were done? When was the last time you had the spark plugs replaced? So these are all things that you should be asking. So once you've titled your vehicle, before it can really legally be driven on the road, you have to go to the town clerk to also make sure that it has been registered and inspected. So you must go to the town clerk to pay your residence tax. And we've already talked about the title fee. So there's a $25 title fee that you've already paid. So you're doing everything at the same spot. So it first goes title, then it goes registration, and then you're taking it to a facility to have it inspected. So this is what the registration, when we talked about you should always have your license and your registration with you, this is what a registration is going to look like. And over on the far right in that column is they're going to show you what all these fees are going to be. So they total that up, and you're going to have to write out 2 checks, one to the city. I live in Rochester, so Rochester gets a check, and then I send a check to the Department of Safety for registering my vehicle. And let me kind of explain things. So I want you to write this down because a lot of people will ask, well, how much does it cost to register a vehicle? And there's really no good answer to give except to give you these 5 points. So I want you to write these down. Registration is based upon the year and the weight of your vehicle, the type of vehicle, passenger, truck. Is it agricultural? Is it like a used car dealership? They're going to have different plates and different registration requirements than a passenger vehicle. So how much is the car, does it cost? So registering a Mercedes is going to cost a lot more than registering a Ford Escort, just because of the value of the vehicle. They look at if it's a used car, what's the trade-in value if it's not a new vehicle? How long are you registering it for? Okay, if your birthday, let's use this month of April. If your birthday is in November, from April to November is not 12 months, so you may only have it registered for, 6 or 7 months. So it's going to be prorated. If it's really close to your birth month, they'll just, I think they do up to around 15 or 16 months. Okay. And they'll just register it. So you'll have that 15, 16 months or whatever it is. So you don't have to do the 5 months or 4 months or whatever till you get to your birth month. And then depending on what you want for a license plate, do you want a special vanity plate? Do you want just a regular number plate? All that goes into a factor of what your total registration fee is going to be. So we want to make sure that our car is registered by the end of the owner's month. So I always tell my classes, be nice to your dad or your mom. Whoever owns the vehicle, their month of birth is a very expensive month. So I could almost bet that most of you have 2 or 3 vehicles in the driveway. Some of you probably have snow machines or a trailer that you use to take material to the dump. You may have motorcycles or 4-wheelers. Anything that has a license plate, put down in your notes. Anything that has a license plate needs to be registered. So when you're talking about 8 different things, it is so expensive. Okay, you've got to keep these things in mind when you purchase things because some of these fees are reoccurring every year. Okay, there's no time off. Now, you have to be processed at the town clerk. You can do some of these things at the DMV substation. The plates are given out randomly, or you could request a vanity plate, which I have found to be an additional $40 on top of your regular registration. So if registration was going to be $130, they tack on $40, you're paying $170. Okay. Now, with vanity plates, you've got to remember too that you have to give them a list of things or possibilities of sequences of letters and numbers. And if your top choice is available, you get it. If they start seeing that all these things you wanted on your license plate, you may get down to your fourth or fifth choice. At that point, you may not even want it anymore, but you can't get a plate that it's already been issued. And we already talked about other vehicles being registered, so. Okay, vehicle inspection. So now that you've registered your vehicle, now you've got to get it inspected. So it also has to be done during the owner's month of birth. So go to any dealership, garage, repair shop that has, it's a symbol, and I'm going to show it to you in a moment. It looks like the old man of the mountain, and there's going to be a number of the facility on that sign, and they're also going to give you what the cost of it is. Okay, but reason why we have inspection, and some states don't, is that we want to make sure that cars are in safe operating condition to be out on the roadway. So a lot of states in New England have inspections. Down south, like Florida, does not, because road salt is an enemy of vehicles. It does a job on cars, on metal. So we want to make sure, especially the frame is in good shape. And if your vehicle does pass your inspection, an official sticker will be placed on your windshield indicating that now it is a legal vehicle to be driving. So the items that are checked will include mirrors, horn, wipers, defroster, lights. You don't have to write all these down, but I wanted to include it so you have an idea that it takes a while for them to do an inspection. So just don't think you're going to drop it off and sit there for 10, 15 minutes. They could tell you it could be over an hour to 2 hours. They may take the car out and test the brakes, and they look at windows to make sure they're not cracked or tinted too much, steering, exhaust system, etc. So they've got a whole list of things that they've got to do. Now, also what they've got to do is they've got to try your exhaust system, meaning start the car and see how much of pollutants are going out into the atmosphere. So they hook your exhaust system up to a computer system, and they measure, okay, the exhaust. So the state of New Hampshire does not mandate a certain amount that a station may charge for an inspection. Prices generally range from $20 to $50. I've seen it higher than that, and I've also seen it less than $20. Inspection information from both the safety and emissions inspections will be entered into a computer system, and I electronically transferred to the DMV. So basically, the state is going to have an idea of what was right, what was wrong, and what actually happened during your inspection. Let me just mention that when you see something that is very cheap, here it's roughly $40 for safety, $40 for emissions. So you've got to add that up, or safety and emissions, depending on the type of vehicle that you have. It could be additional or the same. Be very careful about anything that's really cheap or free, because a lot of times what these repair shops do is they try to get you to have the repairs done there. So I've added a few notes here that I want you to write down. The first thing is you should know who you're going to. And what I mean by that is that just don't trust anybody. Go online, see what their rating is with Yelp or whatever. AAA is a good way to go, because if you ever have any problems with your vehicle or the inspection station, you could always lodge a complaint, and AAA will act on your behalf to try to resolve any issues that you may have. And usually AAA is only going to deal with reputable companies. Ask your parents, your friends, who do they go to? That's the best thing to do, because if you just go up to a random person, you just don't know the quality of their work. Make sure you know how much it costs, so look for the sign outside like I've got posted here. The other thing too is that if they call you and say that, you need new tires or you need this done to your vehicle, make sure that they give you a quote, because they're not supposed to be able to do any work on your vehicle unless they've got a written okay or a verbal okay. So they're going to be calling you to tell you what goes on. Okay? If they do any work on your vehicle, ask for the parts back. And you're probably thinking, well, why do I need those? If it's broken, why do I need a broken part? Because it proves to you that they did the work. Some people, and I'm not lying, I don't have the video anymore, I don't know what happened to it, but there was a TV program that put a camera in the inside of the hood of a vehicle. So when the hood went up, it pointed down to show what kind of work was being done. And we found on this particular story that they were doing for this news program that 7 out of 10 places that they went to did not do the work that they said that they were going to do, or only did half of the work. Okay, so there's a lot of people that are scamming people when it comes to cars. Think about it. If you know nothing about cars, just like computers, if people have no knowledge about something, it is so easy to take advantage of people. So make sure that you trust the people that are doing the work. I'll give you another story. My daughter was going to school in Massachusetts, and she changed her residency, so she was a Mass resident. And she knew her brakes were acting kind of funny, so she knew that she had brake problems. Well, if it's a safety issue, they may not let you take the vehicle off the property. So a lot of times, if something needs to be done, like a light bulb replaced, and this is why I had you do, light bulbs and fuses and stuff like that. That's stuff that you should be able to do the work on your own vehicle. So don't have them do that kind of work, because they're going to charge you $50, $60 an hour at a prorated base. It's going to really rack up that $40 inspection. Well, anyways, they told my daughter that she couldn't take her vehicle off the premises because the brakes were bad, because she went there for an inspection. So they can legally do that. But what she did, and she's a AAA member, she says, fine, I won't drive it. I'll have it towed. So she had AAA come and tow the vehicle to her boyfriend's house, and his dad, who knew something about cars, did the work on the brakes, and then they went back and had someone do the inspection again. So don't think that you have to do the work at the facility that did the inspection. So if your dad knows how to do it, you got a relative that knows how to do it, you might be able to save some money that way. And the places that I go, they just want to make sure that the work was done. So after the work is done, I bring it back and I show them that I had it done. And then they put the sticker on my vehicle. So don't think that, don't get forced or bullied into thinking that you have to get it done right there. This is what goes on your license plate. If you take a look, the month that you had your registration, so the 4th, which would be April. And this is an old license plate. So 2013 was when the car was registered. So the whole year. And a lot of people wonder why police officers hang out near toll booths at the beginning of the month. They're not looking for people that don't have Easy Pass or just going too fast through the toll booth. They're looking for people that haven't had their car registered and inspected. They're looking at your license plate. And the red 11, okay, and I don't even think that's not a new sticker. I should get a picture of a new sticker. That's an old sticker. But that is a inspection sticker that's up near your Easy Pass. It used to go right in the middle. Now what they do is they put the inspection sticker over on the left side of your windshield. And every state is doing that now. So that's a universal thing that they're doing. So make sure that your car is inspected and registered and titled and all that stuff, and you're going to be good to go. Don't fake it. All right? Don't fake it. This is someone that said they didn't have enough money. So what they did is they went to the computer and they made their own inspection sticker. From a distance, maybe you can, fool people, but for the most part, it doesn't. Okay? That takes us to the end of what we're covering for today, but I wasn't able to show you a video that I wanted to with seatbelts. So I'm just going to mention a few things, and then I'm going to let the video go. And then I want you to make sure you take notes on it because there will be a question on the midterm on it. But your homework is to read chapter 6 and 7. Let me get out of this. Let me go to me. So 6 and 7, I want to make sure that you read that. It's on using your eyes and making choices while driving. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about communication and turning, and section 5 and section 8 in the manual. Pretty easy reading from the manual, but just remember, do the questions on 6 or 7 at the very end of the chapter. Okay, there should probably be about 10 to 15 questions that you should be able to do. If you haven't sent in your poster, if you did a video, whatever, radio ad, make sure that I get that today, because I was impressed by what people did. And like I said, I'll try to curate some of the posters that people did so we can see at the end of the week. And I've got a radio ad that was super good. I'll play that too later in the week for people to hear what other people did for it. So I'm really pleased with that. So I think this is going to probably take probably about 10 minutes. So I want you to stay on just a little bit longer, but I want to have you see this and write down. There are 3 types of collisions. So I'll give you the question that I want you to write down. So write this down. There are 3 types of collisions that happen when a car hits something. So you're going to find in the video, it's going to talk about something is going to hit something else. Then the second collision is something's going to hit something else. And then the third collision, what are you hitting with something else? So there are 3 types of collisions that are happening. So watch this, and then you're all set for today.
Why is it that some spectacular race car crashes produce only minor injuries? How can 3 collisions occur in this one crash between a car and a wall? The answers are determined by the laws of nature and can best be explained when physics meets biology. Through injury biomechanics, the study of the effects of forces on the human body, we've learned much about what happens in high-speed race car crashes, and doctors and engineers have used this information to build safer race cars and tracks. In a similar way, the study of injury biomechanics and crash testing has helped us learn what happens to the human body in passenger car crashes, and what works and doesn't work to reduce injuries and deaths in real-world crashes.
Hi, I'm Griff Jones. I'm a science teacher, and I'm here at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's Vehicle Research Center to explore the basic science behind injuries in vehicle crashes. So let's go behind the scenes and take a closer look at what happens to the human body in a crash. What is the first scientific discipline that comes to mind when you think of car crashes? It's probably physics, right? Because Newton's laws of motion govern what happens to a vehicle in a crash. But if we want to understand how crashes cause injuries to people, we need to look at what occurs when physical forces are applied to organs, tissues, and cells. This happens when physics meets biology in a field called injury biomechanics.
The Institute's Vehicle Research Center is a world-class facility for vehicle research and testing. A reporter described the crash hall with its 3 runways as a cross between a Hollywood soundstage and a NASA clean room. Vehicles are propelled down the runways at precise speeds, using a system of nitrogen-powered hydraulic motors and cables. The lighting array provides up to 750,000 watts of non-glare illumination for the 500 frames per second high-speed cameras. The research tests we're conducting here today focuses on how injuries occur in real-world crashes. This experimental crash replicates one in which a car hit a tree. In an attempt to understand injury patterns found in the occupants of the actual crash, Researchers have disconnected the airbags.
Looking at the driver's chest, we can see the chest deflection reached about 50 millimeters of compression. The chest accelerations 70 to 80 G resultant acceleration range. High likelihood of skull fracture.
Very bad.
Yeah, very bad.
Figuring out what just happened in this test crash is the job of the research engineers here. Using sophisticated tools like instrumented crash test dummies, instrumentation in the car, and slow-motion film, they can analyze every detail and construct a precise picture of exactly what the vehicle and the occupants went through. When research engineers use terms like the chest deflection reached about 50 millimeters, how does that relate to what a human occupant would experience? If chest acceleration is 70 to 80 Gs, which means that a force equivalent to 70 to 80 times the weight of the dummy's chest is pressing on it, is that survivable? How do these guys know the answers? The search for the limits of human tolerance to forces began decades ago. Today's race car and passenger car drivers benefit from biomechanics studies that were conducted during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s in the field of aviation, investigating how to protect pilots and astronauts from the strenuous forces of ejections and high-speed travel. Colonel John Stapp, a medical doctor and biophysicist in the United States Air Force, used himself as the test subject in his investigations of human tolerance to high G environments.
From the outside, watch the breakneck stop.
In one of his many tests, Dr. Stapp reached a speed of 632 miles per hour before one of the most powerful braking systems of all time stopped him in 1.4 seconds, subjecting him to more than 40 times the pull of gravity, or 40 Gs. His research helped establish the limits of human tolerance to high G environments and saved many lives through development and improvement of protective systems for ejection seats. Realizing the Air Force lost nearly as many men to car crashes as they did to plane crashes, Dr. Stapp began a car crash program using the rocket sled for seatbelt experiments. Human volunteers working with his biophysics research team endured as many as 28 Gs during safety belt tests. This early research laid the foundation for the complex crash analysis that is conducted here today. These dummies are a perfect example of combining science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to produce new tools that extend scientific understanding. They are the modern-day version of Dr. Stapp's volunteers. There's not just one dummy for VRC testing, nor even one type. There's a whole family of dummies for crash testing.
This is our crash test dummy family, ranging from a 6-month-old all the way up to a 95th percentile male.
95th percentile of what?
That means that it is larger than 95% of the male population in the U.S.
Wow, so this is a big guy.
Yes, if he could stand, he would be about 6'2", about 223 pounds, pretty big. The female, if she could stand, about 5 foot tall, 107 pounds.
How about the smaller dummies?
They're called Crabbies.
Crabbies? Are they moody?
They're not moody, but it stands for Child Restraint Airbag Interaction.
And so when we're doing the frontal crash test, it's 50th percentile?
Yes.
Okay. Side impact is the small female.
Side impact dummy is a very complicated dummy. It has the most instrumentation. They have sensors from the head to the toe. The accelerometers give us the acceleration of the mass. The load cell measures force. And then we have the potentiometers that measure the displacement. The ribs actually move.
So dummies are very sophisticated. They provide data from many different body regions. But how do we connect this to people? What is the link between all these crash test data and the injuries that people experience in real-world crashes?
The dummy is measuring different things. It's measuring acceleration, force, and in some cases distortion of the body parts. Those measurements can be compared against similar measurements made in experiments on biological tissues, using either animal models or cadaver models to get an idea of how much stress can this body part take before it breaks. So in order to understand whether or not a person would be injured, you need to know how strong the bones are, how strong the tissues are, and what conditions will cause them to break.
So the crash test dummies try to get a clearer picture of what's really happening to the people. Is that where the term biofidelity comes from?
It's exactly where the term biofidelity comes from. What biofidelity means is the characteristic of the dummy that represents how close to actually being a human being it is. So the higher the biofidelity, the more like a human being it is in representing how it moves, what types of stresses it measures in the crash test, and then the true-to-lifeness of those measurements to the prediction of injury in a real person.
This is how research engineers can tell us with precision what a human occupant would have experienced in a test crash. Dr. Stapp's experiments, plus years of research with real biological tissues from cadavers and animals, have produced a set of reference values against which we can compare the stresses and strains the dummies experience. So we can measure these in a test crash and can figure out if they would cause injury to a human occupant. But what do these stresses and strains actually do to people to cause injury? Let's start with some basic anatomy. Your body contains over 100 trillion cells and is structurally organized into 4 levels: cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. Tissue is a group of similar cells working together to perform a common function. Organs are made up of 2 or more types of tissue working together to perform a specific function. And each organ is part of at least one organ system that performs major activities or processes. Your body contains 4 fluid-filled spaces called body cavities that house and protect your major internal organs. Within the body cavities, your organs are suspended in fluid that supports their weight and prevents them from being deformed by normal movements. Your organs are also protected by your bones and muscles. For example, your heart and lungs are protected by your rib cage and sternum inside the thoracic cavity. Your brain is encased within your cranial cavity and is protected by your skull. Now, with this as background, remember the question from the beginning of this film. How is it possible to have 3 collisions in a single crash? Remember, the laws of physics hold true everywhere. On a highway, on a racetrack, and even inside your body. If a race car is going 200 miles per hour, so is the driver's body and every organ inside it. Let's answer the question. The first collision is between the car and the wall. The second is between the driver and the car's interior. And the third is between the driver's internal organs and the inside walls of his or her body cavities. Tell me a little bit more about the injury. To help us understand more about what happens to organs in the third collision, let's meet Dr. Stephen Olvey, a neurocritical care physician and director of the Neuroscience Intensive Care Unit at the University of Miami's Jackson Memorial Hospital.
Basically, during a crash, you have 3 collisions. You have the initial crash of the vehicle. Then you have the occupant hitting something inside the car and coming to a sudden stop. This results in impacts inside the body. For example, the lungs can hit the inside of the rib cage, the heart can hit the breastbone or inside of the rib cage, resulting in either pulmonary contusion or myocardial contusion. This is what causes ruptured spleens, lacerated livers, because you have part of the organ well anchored and the other part is free to move about. And this causes a shearing force to take place in the organ, resulting in hemorrhage or tearing of the tissue. The brain is enclosed in a rigid case, the skull, and it's cushioned and surrounded by the cerebral spinal fluid. The cerebral spinal fluid is actually a different density than the brain itself, so in the event of an impact to the skull, the brain begins to move, the cerebral spinal fluid begins to move, but it moves at a different rate than the brain. So it will actually displace the brain in the opposite direction of the initial impact to the brain.
This simple experiment helps illustrate.
Okay, I just want to review just a few things that he went over. So I told you I wanted you to write down there are 3 types of collisions, so let's write this down. The first one is the car hitting the wall or an object, okay? So that's the first collision. Now, what I want you to write down in your notes, this is your responsibility. This is why you're learning to be a good driver. This has a lot to do with you. Most people can drive years without being involved in a crash. So when a car hits another car, another object, it has to do with people. The second collision is that your body hits the inside of the steering wheel or the instrument panel. So you're hitting the inside of the car. This has to do with what we covered last week. This has to do whether you have your seatbelt on, whether you have a car that has a good airbag system. Okay, so this has to do with safety equipment. So this has to do with your vehicle. The last crash is your organs hitting the inside of your body cavity. Okay, you have no control over that. That is just genetics. That is how well you're built, whether you're young, whether you're old. So you're losing a little bit with each one of these 3 crashes. And the other thing that I want you to take away from this is that even though someone is involved in a crash with a safe car, with their safety belt on, with an airbag, there is still injury that is being done inside your body that you probably don't even know about. Okay? And it can be pretty bad. So a lot of times when you're involved in a crash, and we're going to have another class on what to do at the scene of an accident or a crash, be very careful when you stop moving people or getting out of a car. This is why it's so important to call 911 and get medical help there as quickly as possible, because seconds are vital to get the help that's needed to people that are hurt. So that's just something I wanted to show you when we did the thing on safety. So we're basically caught up. While the video was going, I was going through some of the text messages, because remember, your text messages is a linear thing of what we're covering in class and when you're handing things in. So when I look through scroll through your name and I don't see things, okay, you've got to get those in. And plus it shows you. You can't fake it. You either sent it in on time or you completed it. So I know some people have done some email stuff, but for the most part, text messages is the best way to take a picture of the chapter test. And I try not to give you a lot of written work to do. I know we had the project and stuff like that, but this shows me that you're reading, you're doing your work, and you're being involved in the program. So make sure you do your work, because this is a pass-fail class. All right, so tomorrow we'll be talking about those subjects of turns, communication, and using our eyes. So have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.